I want you to pay close attention to the information on this video. And if this is something new to you, hopefully it will be the catalyst for you taking an interest in this subject. There's a lot of knowledge and education you need in order to do this most effectively, but you can actually begin with very little knowledge, understanding, or education. It's just that you're talking about investing your money. So regardless of what the amount of money is or what it means to you, you have to be careful, but take this for what it is.
I want to talk now about the time value of money. It's a very basic and simple concept, but unfortunately, enough people do not understand it or practice it. And basically, it's basic mathematics. And put aside your negativity for one moment and hear what I'm going to say and pay attention to what I'm going to show you. It has to do with the idea of investing, with the idea of multiplying your investment over time. And one way you can do that is through what's called a DRIP program. A DRIP stands for a direct reinvestment plan. Okay? And what that means is you invest in companies where they pay dividends. Not all companies do, but you buy stock in companies where they pay dividends to their shareholders. And dividends would be a percentage of the profits of the company are paid back to the investors in the company, those who own stock in the company. Obviously, the more stock you own, the more your dividend will be. Okay? I mean, your dividend could actually be a few cents or a few dollars for one stock, depending upon a lot of things. But what you do basically is you set it up to where instead of ever receiving an actual dividend check, you basically tell them, hold on to my dividend and reinvest it once there is enough money to buy another share of stock. A lot of companies also would allow you to buy fractional shares of stock. So even if your dividend is not enough to buy a whole share, you can still immediately buy a fractional share. Okay? So you don't have to understand all of that. Just understand that. Let's assume an average 10% return. 10%, that's taking into account the ebbs and the flows of the market, which are always going to happen. Sometimes it's going to be less than 10%. Sometimes it's going to be more. Let's just assume 10%. And let's just take a look at what happens. Let's look at math. You're doing $50 a month. You're never, ever going to invest more than $50 per month. Okay? Now, after 1 year, let's look at what happens. All right. After 1 year, you would have invested $630, which would have grown to $666. Mark of the beast. After 1 year at $50, you've actually made a $36.60 profit. Okay, now let's expand this out over 5 years. After 5 years, you would have invested $3,030. Your investment would have grown to $3,953.48. So obviously you would have grown $923.43 you would have made on your $3,030 investment. Now let's look at 10 years. What happens? After 10 years, still paying the same $50 per month, you would have put in $6,030. You would have made $10,408. Now let's jump to 30 years, and which would be the working life of most people. Let's say they started their job in their 20s. That's when they started doing this. You would have put in a total of $18,000.30, but your net investment worth would have grown to $114,000.561. Again, that's with a total of $18,000. Okay. Now, if you're smart, you would begin to put in a lot more than $50 per month. But if you never put in more than $50 per month in the average working life of a person of 30 years, let's say you started when you're 25, you retired at 55, which is early for a lot of people, you would have $114,561 I'm sorry, $114,561.39, never putting in more than $50 a month. Now, here's where the magic happens. If you want to plan, let's say you have a newborn baby and you begin doing this for them, you say, by the time you're 18, I want you to start putting your own $50 per month in this portfolio that I've set up for you. This is what happens with the time value of money. The total for 60 years ever entered in this investment plan would be $36,000 and $36,030. It will have grown to $2,386,566.
Now I want you to really pay attention to what this means. Using this example, at $50 a month, let's say you did it for 20 years. Let's say, again, you did it at the birth of your child. And you did it with the purpose of leaving them a legacy. This is about the time value of money. As you saw, in 5 years, $50 a month, even at 10%, it's not going to be impressive. It takes time for it to really mean something. For even 20 years, which many of you could do in your own lifetime, you would have put in a total of $12,030. It will have grown to $38,504. Okay? So obviously we're talking about more than $26,000 that you would have made above what you invested. But I'm not really that impressed with that. I mean, it's good. It's okay. It's good. But that's 20 years. That's after 20 years if you draw your money out. But if you were to do this for your child, they will have a head start. You can tell them, even when they're very young, by the time you're 20 years old, you should be earning your own money, and I need you to pick up this investment at $50 per month. By the time you are 60, by the time you're able to retire, at retirement age, you will be a multimillionaire. And all you have to do is pay $50 a month. Why? Because I have given you a head start. You're 20 years now. At your birth, I have been investing $50 per month. Your portfolio has grown to $38,504.69. You could cash the money out, but I'm not going to allow you to, because the way I have it set up, you cannot cash it out until your retirement age. Start contributing $50 per month. You don't have to understand it. Just put in $50 a month. Just set it up to where it automatically comes out of any job you have. And when you lose your job, if you get on unemployment, can still, even if you're getting unemployment insurance, still put in that $50 a month. I'm telling you, if you don't do anything else, you will be a multimillionaire. You could live the rest of your life in poverty. This is what you tell your child. You can live the rest of your life in poverty. But if you keep putting in $50 per month, you will be a multi-millionaire, potentially, by the time you are retirement age, even if you have no job to retire from. Because, again, you gave them a 20-year head start. It makes all the difference in the world. Okay? So let's look at what happens after 40 years. That's 20 years of your child putting in their own money. And of course, if you, depending on your age, and if you want to do this for yourself, the math is the same. I'm more impressed with this. You would have put in $24,030. It would have grown to $320,000. $320,000. $320,450.03 to be exact. So even if you're in your 20s or 30 or whatever, and you started doing this in 40 years, you would have $320,000. But you know, personally, I'm still not that impressed. I'm impressed, but let's look at 50 years. Now I'm much more impressed. You've invested a total of $30,030. You have accumulated $877,799.13. If you could wait 10 more years, now keep this number in your head, just 10 more years, even if, that's why I said, if you want to do this for your child, it would be a good thing to do. Build a legacy. Give them a legacy. It's not going to cost you that much money. Anyone could afford $50 per month. You may have more than one child. It doesn't matter. You could divvy this up among them. Now let's look at 60 years. If you have a commitment, because you can do several strategies at the same time. This doesn't have to be the only thing that you have. Now I'm very impressed, because for a total of $36,030, that's the total amount that you or anyone else has ever invested out of pocket, whether it was you or your children who picked up this investment. Because frankly, you could even, if you have two children, you could say put in $25 a piece. But if you really, really want to be ambitious, tell them if you can afford it, when you can afford it, double the $50 per month. Or just add $10 to it or $5. It makes a huge difference. I'll give you the website. You can play with the numbers for yourself. But the bottom line is, whether you started this at a very young age, because most of you, I mean, I don't know. In my family, people live a long time. My grandmother just passed away on my mother's side. She was 90, I think she was 97. And, my parents are close to 80, and they're in very good health. So we live a long time in my family. I mean, on both sides. But at any rate, $50 a month over 60 years, this is $2,386,566.28 at an average 10% return. Of course, this could end up being more. It could end up being less. And I'm going to tell you, the naysayers will talk about the stock market ebbs and flows, dips and twists and all that type of thing, and tell you, but these are long-term investments. Okay? And like I said, the most important thing is investing in the right companies, okay, that are still even going to be in business. Okay? And I can assure you that Google is going to be around 1,000 years from now, if the world were going to be around 1,000 years from now, which it won't. But if it was, Google would still be around. I mean, regardless of what happens in the world, they're going to be around. That's a forward-thinking company. But the bottom line is this. This is what impresses me. For a grand total, you can never take $36,000 right now and invest it. I mean, actually, you could, but it's not easy. But you can't do it in the stock market. You cannot invest $36,000 and then next week cash it in for $2,386,566. Okay, 10% return is actually modest. It's good, but it's not that great. I mean, there's much better returns you can get. Okay, I mean, I have mutual funds that have been averaging like 24% returns, things like that. I have investments that have been doing better than that, but just averaging at 10%. That includes even if there's a stock market crash or anything else. As long as these companies stay in business, and as long as, regardless of what anybody else does, you continue putting in that $50 a month. Okay, and if anything, because I'm going to tell you something. Here's a good thing about investing. If you continue to put in the same amount, that means that, let's just keep it simple. Let's say that your shares were averaging at $50 per share, and there's a crash or something, go down to $10. That means if you still pay $50 per month, you're now getting five shares, whereas you would have gotten one. Now, there are a number of things that make this work. Remember, this is a direct reinvestment program. So these companies are issuing dividends, which you're reinvesting, and oftentimes there's the magical thing, which I love. It's called stock splits. Okay. I think companies like McDonald's have split maybe, I don't know, within the I'm not even going to tell you. I'll put it up right here once I get the information, because I don't know off the top of my head. But they've split quite a few times. And I don't have time to tell you on this video what a stock split is. But basically, let's say that you've accumulated 50 shares of a stock and they do a 2-for-1 split. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to devalue the shares that you have, but they're going to double the amount of shares that you have 2-for-1, which means instead of having 50 shares, let's say, instead of having 50 shares that are worth $20 a piece, now you're going to have 100 shares that are worth $10 a piece. But eventually those shares are going to go back up to what they were and beyond. And the reason they do stock splits is so that they can be more affordable to more people. But if you already own the stock splits are one of the best things that can happen. So with stock splits and dividend reinvestments combined, you're going to accumulate quite a number of shares over time. All of these factors are what it takes to make tremendous amount of wealth that unfortunately a lot of our people just don't participate in.